As I mentioned in the program, as the band grows, so does the list of the people that we have to thank. I apologize if I have omitted anyone in the program, but please let me acknowledge President Richard Bento. If you are here, you can please stand. Supporting the band these past few years. Thank you very much to Vice President Ron Chihiro for the wonderful opening prayer. And thank you to all of the administrators, high school, middle school, all of the directors and the secretaries who have done all sorts of things to accommodate the band. If you are one of our VIPs to be acknowledged, if we can turn the lights on, if you can stand and be recognized, please. High School Principal Marsha Kirai, Middle School Principal George Tanzaki, I have to also especially thank my good friend Alan Ye for being the MC for tonight. Thank you very much, Alan. Special thank you to Daniel Shiro, is he somewhere here? Kind of took care of so many of the grunt work, the program is a result of the tireless hard work of Mrs. Debbie Shintaku, so that's all to her credit. And I foolishly forgot to include my mother, who is responsible for all of the lays that the seniors are about to get, so thank you, Mom. If I can ask all of the seniors to come forward and line up in the front. What I'm going to do this time is an extended, uncensored version of the short one that's in the program. So, the program notes begin. 6 years ago, the class of 2015 was entering the 7th grade and I was the band director. There weren't enough students to run a beginning band class, and so only 3, Brianna, Lauren, and Joshua, were part of the band that year. Paris actually could have joined, but didn't realize she could have come in the 8th grade, and so she joined the following year. Joshua spent the majority of class sitting outside the band room on timeout. I had no idea how to manage middle schoolers, and so I said really foolish things like, if you fool around one more time, I'm going to make you do push-ups. And he immediately said, I can't do any push-ups. And so I thought he was lying, so I waited until he inevitably fooled around again, and I said, aha, do some push-ups. And it turns out he wasn't lying. And I was really embarrassed for him because I thought, oh, he tried several times to do one push-up and I thought I might have scarred him for life. Sorry about that, Joshua. Lauren and Brianna that year were completely overshadowed by the bad behavior of all of the percussionists that year and did very little playing. So things were not looking good. The following year I had no choice. I ran an 8th grade beginning band. 2nd year in a row, the middle school band was a combo of 7th and 8th grade. Except this time, Lauren and Karis were the only ones proficient on their instruments, and they were banished to the side room. I ignored them the entire year. Brianna, unlike her brother, could read notes of music, but couldn't keep her tone going, so my frustration that year is I felt I didn't really teach any of them anything. Nicholas, Siu Lee, I kept calling him Sui Lee, thinking that I was pronouncing it correctly all this time, and he was one of the very few that signed up as a new incoming student. He immediately told me he wanted to play clarinet, and I took one look at him and I said, yes, that's correct. I panicked about the low numbers, and so I wrote a passionate letter to every 8th grade parent that year advocating students to join the band. I promised all sorts of things that I wasn't even sure I could deliver, like a Disneyland trip and something about how music improves you as a person or something like that. Of all of those letters, only Michael Dang returned it and said, yes, sign me up for that. turns out, I was able to take you to Disneyland after all. We went last year, I took the band. So, that same year, 8th grade, I lied to Josh about how easy it would be to learn a second instrument, and I convinced him to switch to the alto saxophone. The real reason is I couldn't stand him as a percussionist, and I knew he would drive me insane if he was still on that instrument. In the 9th grade, Brianna seemed so miserable on the flute that she agreed to take beginning band when it was offered again. That same year, Domo auditioned. I don't know if she remembers this, but she was so terrified, she sat in her chair, held the flute up to her face, and no sound came out. I tactfully suggested beginning band, and she agreed. That year was a turning point, because for the first time, we started the high school beginning band, and the illuminous roster of new students that year joined. We had Sarah, Domo, Sydney, and Brianna as trumpeters. Sarah broke her first trumpet that I let her use, and did not stop until she broke 3 more. Alumni later that year told me how mortified they were after I would angrily accuse her of being the trumpet breaker every rehearsal. Sydney and Domo were simultaneously the band's cheerleaders and the sergeant at arms. It never occurred to me to tell them how much I admired that about them that first year. So, thank you. Ty, Tyler, and Kyle were quiet and silent, but they practiced and they rose through the ranks of beginning band, concert band, and finally the wind ensemble. Deanna and Joyce were an inseparable duo, and they fought as often as they gossiped during class instead of paying attention. My proudest moment of that class, I don't know if you remember this, was on the day before the concert. I'd arranged a substitute to watch over. As I made concert preparations, I was running in and out. And I noticed that on their own, they kind of got into a circle and they started to practice their music. The sub, who was not a teacher at HBA, called me aside and had this weird look on his face. He says, "Is this normal?" And I hid my excitement. I just said no and walked away. That year, new to the school, but already being able to play the flute, Selena placed into the wind ensemble, but it wasn't without considerable trauma. That year, I overheard a conversation between her and Karis that their only goal that year was not to be last chair. I'll leave it to your imagination which one of them made that goal. Daniel Traylor was the most irritating new freshman that year. He constantly smirked at me during class, spreading his legs and dropping his trombone every chance he could get, as if to make sure I knew how little he respected me. The turning point actually happened one afternoon under those old umbrella tables where after a lot of practice and yelling, I successfully taught him to complete the square. I think at that point he realized he actually had some skill as a student and that learning might actually take some effort. He later made it a point to tell me that he was returning to band not because his mother was forcing him, but because he chose to. That meant a lot at the time. Later that year, I saw Evan fiddling around with some tunes on the ukulele, and I immediately told one of his friends to recruit him. At that time, summer band was an informal class, not officially offered. I arbitrarily would set the days and times we would meet, along with other recruits, Aaron and Brenner. That summer was the most ridiculous mix of work and play. Each one of us took on a persona from the Dragon Ball Z Abridged series, with me as Master Guru, Brenner as Dendi, Aaron as Krillin, you know, because he's bald, and Evan as Nail. Do you remember that, Evan? So several times a day I would quote from the series and I would just whine his name. I would go, Nail! Nail! And he would say, yes, Master Guru. We had superhero dress-up day. We had beach day. All of their dress-ups were handmade and horrifically embarrassing. And they each caught the bus to school, so they had to wear it in public. There was a vagrant day, and of course, that one Thursday that we can never talk about ever again. Jeremy was one of the last to join the band as a 10th grader, and he could already play the baritone and tuba. He initially was a baritone player in the concert band, but agreed to switch upon entering the wind ensemble to tuba. Mina, unfortunately, entered at a time when she got blamed for absolutely everything. The thing that I'll remember the most about her is when she hits the crash cymbal and her hair flies around like wild. Growing up in the band for these students was not a pleasant experience at times. I remember putting Brenner under the gun every day for several weeks at that one snare solo.